Boa tarde a todos. Gostaria de dar boas-vindas a todos vós. E agora a seguir vou passar para inglês. Quem mais passa? Boa tarde a todos, mais uma vez. Gostaria de dar as boas-vindas e gostaria também de... estou desligado. Ok, agora sim. Bom, já vos dei as boas-vindas, por isso. Gostaria, em primeiro lugar, de agradecer à professora Joana Rezende e a todos os estudantes que colaboraram nesta organização. Foi um desafio que foi proposto. E agora vou passar para inglês, porque temos convidados também em inglês. So, thank you all for coming. And I would like to thank for the acceptance of this challenge. So today, Creative Colab is the first one of, I hope, a series of these seminars that are the result of a semester of work from the PhD students, coordinated by Professora Joana Rezende. She's here also to speak something about this event. And it is an honor to have you all here. And of course, I'd like to thank all the invited guests to participate on this event. Without them, it would be also impossible to have this. And thank you very much for attending this. It will be great events, I'm sure. And of course, to thanks Daniel Catalão for moderating this session also, as usually with great quality. Is an honorable guest always for these events. So thank you all and enjoy it. It's for us in the doctoral program. It's a pleasure to have you all here and to have this event. So thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Joana Rezende. I would like to start thanking all the speakers and Daniel for joining us today. I would like to thank our students. This session was organized by the first year PhD for the first year students of the PhD program in digital media, and this is the product of their hard work. I would like to tell you that it was a great pleasure to work with them. They were very dynamic, very proactive. And I would also like to tell you that this session we have today is on creative collaboration. And this example that we have today, this seminar, was also a product of creative collaboration. This is something that we collaborated in order to have this interesting and exciting discussion today. They all have very different backgrounds, and it was very challenging to find the bridge between us so that we could collaborate in order to have a nice session. And I hope that you all enjoy it. I would also like to thank Professor António Coelho, the PINC, for the support, and Marisa also was a great help in organizing all this. Thank you all. I hope you enjoy, and I give the word to our speaker,
Okay.
Daniel.
It's me now.
Yeah.
It's my time. So it's always strange speaking English when you're in Portugal, but we have people from different parts of the world, and this is the way we have to understand each other with more or less better or worse English. We will understand each other. So this creative collab will have a discussion unfolding in three main vectors: audience and market, interaction, and storytelling. The three guests will present their diverse view, and afterwards we'll have a round table, which is not round, so only in the minds of an artist this could be a round table, but whatever. So I expect you to participate and give us your own questions and fire your own ideas so we can have a better discussion afterwards about this creation, collaboration, and I will add curation. I think curation is most important nowadays in this digital world where everyone takes part. So our guests today are Valentina Nisi, that will talk us about storytelling, Peter Beyls about interaction, and Correia de Barros about audience and market. I will present each one as they before they speak. So we'll start with Anna, and with Peter. It's first, okay? No, whatever. We changed it, and nobody told me. Okay, so Peter, then who is talking next? You?
That was last.
This is a democracy, so whatever.
Last.
I can be absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so. Okay, so Peter, you start, and I think it will be very interesting to hear from you. We have talked a little bit on lunch, and I'm really keen to hear what you're going to tell us. Peter Beyls is an interdisciplinary artist and scientist developing generative systems in music, the visual arts, and hybrid formats. He's well known for his pioneering work with cellular automaton music and research with evolutionary algorithms in human-computer improvisation. His areas of interest include interactive systems, software as artistic statement, cognitive issues in art and, in general, artificial intelligence and the arts. Beyls studied at the Royal Music Conservatory in Brussels, EMS Stockholm, Ghent University, and the Slade School of Art, University College London. He holds a PhD in computer science from Plymouth University in the UK. Actively lectures, performs, and exhibits worldwide. Since 2013, he has been a full-time research professor at CITAR, Universidade Católica Portuguesa, here in Porto. A recent monograph provides a concise overview of his multifaceted work. So, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon. You hear me? Yeah. So my talk will be on interaction. It will be mainly about cognitive issues in interaction. So I suggest that we start with an early example of interaction in the arts. It's 1907. It's about intimate interaction. It's not about machines, it's not about media art, but it's definitely about intimate interaction in the arts. And we will come back to this later on. So suppose we have to chart a number of functional features of what do we mean by interaction. But this is the first question, of course, because we all talk about interacting with DVDs, interacting with storytelling, with the internet, with human-machine interaction in music, with interactive composing and so on. But let's see if we can find a number of functional features. This is very much idiosyncratic. I mean, it's my personal opinion. So I think interaction has to do with the exploration of unknown objects. So it's not about solving problems. It has more to do with the creation of socio-cultural awareness. It has to do with autonomy. What is the difference in interaction? What is the difference between automatic systems and autonomous systems? And second on, I think interaction has to do with mutual and simultaneous activity of at least two partners. So we have to be in the same boat, and we have to be possibly in the same culture, and with mutual interest to act on a simultaneous basis. It is about speculation. In terms of computing, I always talk about speculative computing. It is about throwing a fish and then seeing what happens, okay? So it is, by definition, interaction is an experimental kind of thing. And it is about initiative in mutual understanding. This has to do with if we interact with software, we expect to be sharing the same environment with machines, and so we create in a common environment with shared initiatives and towards a common understanding. So cognition is basic in this thing. Relationships is the notion of a relationship is crucial and vital in any discussion on interaction. So we explore variable, dynamic relationships in high-dimensional spaces. Okay? Social spaces, cultural spaces, whatever spaces, microscopic spaces, macroscopic spaces. I will show a number of examples on that. But it has to do with relationships. And also, If you check my publications, you will find that I develop technologies to develop artificial relationships with machines. It is intrinsically motivation-driven. This is also key to interaction. If you are not motivated, you will not survive. So internal and external pressure is absolutely necessary in order to do anything at all. Unpredictability. True native interaction is about accommodating the unpredictable. It is about graceful degradation. This actually makes a distinction between man and machine. Machines are notoriously non-graceful degradation. If you have an algorithm or an expert system, for instance, and rules are missing or a rule is incomplete or maybe wrong, the system will, there will be non-graceful degradation in performance. So what we have is binary functionality. The system either works or it doesn't. In nature, the situation is completely different because everything in nature is adaptive. Maximize computational fluidity and flow. This, of course, has to do with the Csikszentmihalyi. Maybe you have read the book, On the Theory of Flow. No? Doesn't ring a bell? It's an important idea, I think, and in order, if we are interested in the creation of computational models of, say, human creativity and how we interact, it is important to maximize the perspective and to maximize the options in order to create a system that feeds back on itself. There is positive. It is self-organizing because there is positive feedback within the act of creation. We start from scratch. We love to start from scratch because most of the time we can't start from scratch because in particular in a world inhabited by by the internet, I'm interacting with the mic because I don't like it. Anyway, starting from scratch is very difficult. You know, starting from a blank sheet of paper, which we love, it's like the painter who's dedicated to the blank canvas, and this is the whole question is there. It's blank, and you can go anywhere you like. So we should start without prejudice, and this is very important, I think. There is implicit creation of cognitive momentum. This relates to the notion of flow, of course, and for instance, if we interact with the notion of programming, when I write a program to create a drawing, because some of the work I do is I develop programs and I dream some type of activity, and then I implement and formalize it in a program. And I love to program in Lisp, for instance, because it's a symbolic programming language, and it's very in high fluidity and so on and so forth. And so when you program, you actually formalize aspects of what you do not know, rather than aspects of what you know, because otherwise it wouldn't be fun to program at all. Because if the system just feeds back what you already know, it's not very interesting. So but anyway, the program feeds back to the artist. You get feedback on the potential of the idea that you have actually implemented. And for that reason, computer programming is an act of introspection. It's about, it provides information of who you really are, where are you going, and so on and so forth. So this is what I call cognitive momentum in the act of creation. This is something else. It has to do with infinity, of course, and in particular, the impression of infinity. Of course, if we are dealing, for instance, with a database of images and sounds or whatever, we might have of course, the database is finite, but we might have the impression of infinity. And from there on, we can speculate on trajectories in databases, but also on the culture and the dimensionalities that oversee whatever database. And of course, from there on, we can developed a kind of a cognitive vehicle to explore the act of interaction itself. The notion of database in the arts, of course, is an important kind of thing. If we think of Gerhard Richter, the Atlas, you know, the German painter, it's a good example, but there's also the work of Victoria Vesna in UC Irvine. So there's a lot, the notion of creating art with databases is interesting, I think. Finally, my last, this is music in 12 parts. Improvisation as perpetual renewal. Improvisation is something that is closely linked to interaction. It is something that we can learn from the culture and the language of jazz. I love jazz, and by the way, there's a wonderful book, you know the work of George Lewis? No? George wrote a book, and the book is entitled A Power Stronger Than Itself. And it's basically about the cognition of what it means to be a black jazz musician in the US. And so this is about improvisation and perpetual renewal, because renewal and improvisation, I think as cultural statements are very important. Now, this is just a list, but if we switch to, I have to hurry up, because this is something that I would like to share with you. This is a short fragment that I actually shot myself in Atlanta in the US. And I think it's a perfect example of interaction, what we mean by interaction. It's about survival, because these animals have to surface in order to breed. And this is what I call true interaction. And if we switch from nature to culture, we might think in terms of objects and people and culture and environment. And they are all connected into this biotope in terms of relationships and dynamic relationships. Okay, this is typically what we think of interaction interacting with computers. This is at EMS, the Electronic Music Studio in Stockholm. At the time, they had the most fantastic computer music setup in Europe of all times. And this is the systems programmer. But what's important here, there is a relationship type number 1 that I would say. And so the person communicates with the object in kind of a dialogue in the act of programming. And therefore, the object embodies the person. This is important. And the experience, the aesthetic experience actually follows from obtaining results from the program, from the act of programming itself. So this is a very good example of result-driven interaction. If we look at this, great Cecil Taylor improvising, this is relationship number 2. It is about the object really is an extension of the body, and the person actually embodies the object. So it's the other way around. And it is action-driven. It is not about results, but it's about control. It is about doing. It is about expression, which is a totally different kind of thing. If we move on to relationship number 3, you know what this is? Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas. Well, if you go there, you will 2 minutes. Oh my God! I will have to switch a little. A few examples of interactive art relationship type number 4. All of them are social settings. But I think this is also an excellent example of interactive art. Is the piece called Portrait of Ross by Felix Gonzalez Torres. It's a heap of candy in a museum. So if you eat one of the candies, it will change your body forever. So this is what I also call interaction. This is another interesting metaphor of interaction, defined by culture, deeply rooted in culture. This is another metaphor that was first suggested by Joel Chatterby, American composer, computer programmer, and he likens human-machine interaction in interactive composing to steering a boat to a remote harbor while facing a rough ocean, which is kind of a nice model, I think. Another example is the flock of birds interacts in space. Another example is where people are deeply connected to culture and interact even with their eyes closed, and because they all connect very deeply. So if this actually seems to work on a macroscopic basis in society, I'm creating a relationship or a link between social expression in culture to massive parallel computing, in fact. And to do so, we pass the human brain, where we have 100 billion interacting neurons dancing in my brain, and still it offers me functionality. I can talk, and I can see, and I can walk, and it even supports my notion of human consciousness. So this is pretty hot stuff. So, and for that reason, I implemented an artificial brain a while ago. That it's an artificial ear that configures itself, and it's completely adaptive to whatever it does, and it uses genetic algorithms and genetic programming to optimize itself. If we look at sensor technology is important, I think, and these are the kind of sensors that people were using 100 years ago. And to listen to the universe, this is a more recent piece. It's an audiovisual installation that I created a while ago, and it uses 10,000 servers that are spread around the world, and I'm pinging these servers for information on the direction and the intensity of the wind at all these different places. And this is configured into a particle system. So we have artificial particles, artificial dusts, which is activated by physical wind. So from macroscopic to microscopic universes, we can switch. This is a machine learning experiment with live fish, and I was interested to figure out if I could influence the behavior of the fish and then track dynamic behavior by having flashing patterns and so on. This is an older thing with sensors, the infrared sensor, the infrared violin, where there are infrared sensors in the violin where there is bodily expression. More sensor technology, Leticia Tsunami, you might have heard of her. She's in California, and she developed this glove that is very expressive. This all has to do with sensor technology outside the body. This is hybrid sensor technology. Neil Harbison, it's the first, probably the first cyborg with a sensor implant. And so at the back of his skull, there's a plug. And the plug is connected to this sensor because he is colorblind, and he can hear the colors through his brain with the plug-in sensor. Of course, from there on, being connected to the internet, bidirectional, so this is the stellar where the ear can actually hear, and the ear can hear what it hears and also send it out to the internet, but the ear can also listen to the internet. So this is great work. There is more new sensor technology coming on. This is a sensor technology for the brain that you can implant, and then it will dissolve by itself. This is more recent, 2 square millimeter temperature sensor that does not need energy, and energy is a bottleneck in all portable electronic equipment. So this is a sensor that feeds energy from radio waves. So if you have more, like 2 minutes. The aesthetic potential of all this. We are talking about culture and nature. So if we say, what can we do? And very briefly, this is what we can do. If we can compare things and see what we can learn from all that, and then combine the interesting notions from both. options like autonomy and graceful degradation, spontaneous change, the difference in particular between reasoning and emergence, because most cultural artifacts are created top down, while nature, everything behaves bottom up, and so on. So I'll have to rush a little bit. A short extraction of a short movie that I think is really compelling, and
68.
this is 1968, so it's an old example. This is ICA, Institute of Contemporary Art in London. It's a piece by Edward Inadovich, a Polish artist who came to the UK. I worked with him at the time in London, and he's truly a pioneer of interactive art, I think. Oh.
In London.
So this is a good example where we have an extremely intimate linking between an object and a person, and there is a projection of the person actually projects life into a lifeless object. I have one more 1 minute movie that I think is a really cool application that is very recent, 2015. It's a project at MIT Media Lab, and I think it's really cool. Oh, sorry. Come on. I guess my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have the other speakers, and then at the end we will talk. So, now we'll have Ana Correia de Barros. She'll talk about audience and market. Ana is a senior researcher at Fraunhofer, Portugal. where she conducts research on human-computer interaction towards designing accessible user interface for fragile user groups. With a background in industrial design, she holds a PhD in industrial engineering and management, and her PhD research focused on assistive products for stroke survivors. She has been a researcher at the UNITCOM, I8, Lisbon, has lectured at different universities and has led national and international research projects. Her research interests include assistive products, accessibility and usability, design and emotion, social innovation, and inclusive design. So she'll talk us about audience and market, and go writing your questions and ideas so we can debate afterwards. Okay, it's your time.
Hi, hello, thank you for the invitation. I'll be addressing this from a different perspective now. So I work at an applied research center. I'm here to talk about people with whom we work, not so much about how we sell the products. We don't do direct sales, but we mostly work with industry, so it's a different pace in research. And I'm going to talk to about this network that we have of users who work with us in this applied research. And these are mostly older adults. This is because of the demographic changes that are taking place nowadays. And we're pretty much old as it is, but in time societies will be older and older, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it brings about challenges. It's a new way of being in societies. So we need to address this, and we thought that mobile devices, mobile technologies could be tools as very many other tools for independent living, for well-being and active aging. And usually people ask, well, but can older adults use technology? Can you make them use it? Because we have this impression of frailty and of people who have had no contact with technology whatsoever. But the truth is that this user group is arguably the most heterogeneous group there is. So you have challenges, granted. We have changes in vision, changes in memory, changes in attention, but we also have opportunities, large opportunities. We have people who have a lot of experiences to share with us, and when we are interacting with people who are retired, they are very usually, from our experience, very welcome to share their experiences with us and give us their time. So we have created this network to help us out in developing these technologies to be useful in everyday life. And so that we could practice this human-centered design, so placing, in this case, older adults at the center and making everything be about them. So we've created this network that has now over 400 older adults, and we also have privileged informants. So we have informal caregivers, professional caregivers like psychologists or therapists, and all of them together with us allow us to test our solutions to the limit, to design and redesign. And all of this requires management. So we have actually created a project with its own budget to manage this network. And this makes it possible for researchers to concentrate on what they want to do, and all the bureaucratic part, ethics committees and things like that are managed through this network. All the recruitment is managed through this network and makes the process smoother. So guide you through one example that is called Smart Companion. That is something that we have been developing at Fraunhofer for about 4 or 5 years now. And this is just, it started in the beginning, like trying to bring to people who have had no contact with computers whatsoever, try to bring them the advantages of using a mobile phone just for communications or whatnot. And then we started analyzing, working with people and trying to find out what their needs and hopes were. And so it developed to a tool that is modular, and you can choose whatever things make sense to you. In order to do this, we have to do some ground research on font sizes, color contrast, things like that. But also a lot of work on words and meanings of words, not just icons, which we do a lot, but how do you communicate, and what do you ask back? And I like this sentence a lot from Esma. They use this from the Alan Newell group. So they wrote, older people spent their formative years when a chip was a piece of wood or cooked potato, hardware was nuts and bolts, a window was made of glass, a monitor was a school prefect, and software was not even a word. And on top of this, we have the challenges, at least in Portugal, that very many of these terms and words are not even Portuguese. So how do you work with that? You can also use technology. This is what we have been doing, also to understand reaction times, which places of the screen people place more attention, give more attention to, which ones they ignore, accuracy in tapping. And this is an example of heat maps that we're generating while testing. So here to the left, this is a specific example of an application for people with Parkinson's disease. And we had the obvious problem with tremor, but then you could see here that in trying to activate these buttons, which are all, they could use all the area, they would go for the figure, obviously, but in particular, they would go to the icon. This would cause lots of errors. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at in order to improve usability, reduce errors and frustration. But while we're doing this, we are also detecting other things that relate to user experience. So at the other end, this is what we got from a trial in 4 countries, in Israel, Italy, Spain, and Ireland, where people with Parkinson's disease were using this application. Medical doctors really wanted us to have questionnaires pop up to know about their motor symptoms. And this is one pop-up that appeared, and it said, you got a new questionnaire. And then you have 2 buttons. Do you want to start? Do you want to answer it now? And the top one says yes, and the bottom one says no. And you can see that what people really did not want to do just with these heat maps. And one thing that we cannot stress enough is that technology starts with no technology at all. So we engage in lots of playful activities because it's something that we need to give back. Sometimes people we work with don't have very many things to do, and this makes them be more engaged with our activities, spend more time with us, enlarge their span of attention. So we turn diary studies into games, we turn icon studies into games, we do role-playing whenever we can, try to enact several situations. And this is part of the process where we go to the people and design and test and measure and design again and test again in very quick iterations. So this small companion that I was talking about is intended to be like a Swiss Army knife to help people get things done, whatever it is. And we have followed this process, which started with just paper prototypes, which you may know that work very well because people are not afraid of interacting with them. So we use this a lot, up into high fidelity prototypes, and developed this tool that has not only things for communication and medication, but also applications related to nutrition and activity. So things that people were telling us that they wanted, and we saw from our research that made sense. And while we were documenting this, a company called Society came to talk to us and said that they wanted to commercialize this. So this is a new stage where we now are learning not only from the users themselves and from these quick usability tests and from long-term trials which we have made, but also from the client. And one very simple thing that happened that we were not expecting was this. The client asked us to have an application with just 4 buttons called How Are You? And we thought this was for older adults to communicate with their caregivers, and we thought this was really not really nice, just communicating, just, I'm not well, just tapping a button. But in real life, it really worked because people said that they were calling each other, their parents, just because they had to, and conversations were meaningless, and sometimes when the parents tried to call, they were at work and they couldn't talk to them, and at the same time they had a rough time writing messages, so they really had to talk over the phone, and it was quite awkward to have to talk every day and say nothing. So what we found with the trial was that this was, everybody talks about this application, they loved it, and whenever a call came in, it was expected to be something meaningful and not just what did you eat for lunch. So this was quite surprising, I think. And now about the other side. So we're talking about the users, but what we've learned throughout the years was that there's a lot of work to be done with researchers who go into the field every day. And our team is made of designers and engineers. We're not nurses or doctors or psychologists. And we had to learn some things the hard way. And what we started to do now, we train the researchers that come in. We receive many master students every year. And sometimes, if they're good, they're invited to stay with us. And now they have this training. But in the beginning, what we did was let's just go and interview and understand what the experience of these guys has been so far. And the first surprising result was that, you always listen about, you always read about how novice technology users are afraid of talking to researchers, about talking about technology because they don't know the terms and how awkward that can be. But what we found was that researchers were really, really scared of going out and talking to older adults, and they said, we don't have experience with this. I just talked to my grandparents, and this is quite scary for me, which we weren't expecting. And one thing we have to deal with a lot is that with people who are retired and are a bit lonely, lots of times, is that they would like to talk about everything with us whenever we go out in the field. And when I studied linguistics, I found out that this had a term. It's called off-target verbosity, and we have to come up with techniques to work around this. I'm going to skip some slides now because I'm out of time. We learned about placing ourselves with regards to the people we work with. We don't have to be that awkward. We learned about the routines, and you know that you have to schedule things so that it won't conflict with meal times, because people can get quite nervous. We learned to eliminate or work strongly to eliminate bias, because people always try to help, and lots of people would like to show you how they can do things, and they will bring their feature phones and they will not interact with our smartphones, and they will show us how they can do things in the traditional way. We've learned about competition and how it's supposed to be healthy, but how people in their groups can compete even to know who was the best one at the usability study. And then we also have to train our researchers with the emotional impact that it might have with such a close relationship, because people die, people have illnesses, and this has been quite a struggle for us. So I'll just go on and say, give something back, create our activities, show the results, and yeah, just give something back, and people will be grateful to you, and you will be grateful to have that experience in working in the field. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, later you can add some ideas. You don't have to rush so much. We are on schedule. And finally, we will have Valentina Nisi that will talk us about storytelling. She's an assistant professor at the University of Madeira, researcher at Madeira Interactive Technologies Institute, working in the area of digital art and media and HDI. Her research focuses on designing and producing digitally mediated experiences in real spaces, merging culture, context, and landscapes. She previously worked at Media Lab Europe, MIT Media Lab European Researcher Partner. In 2016, she co-founded Amsterdam-based non-profit organization Factorial Mediale, together with Ian Oakley and Martin Postuma de Boer, designing and producing interactive mobile stories for several Amsterdam neighborhoods. Valentina holds a first degree in Fine Arts from Turin Albertine Academy and MSc in Multimedia Systems, and a PhD in Location-Aware Narratives forms from Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland. Her work has won several awards and been published. So let's hear what you have to say to us.
Thank you for the introduction. Okay, it works. And thanks for inviting me here. I'm very happy to share my experience with you. Some of you have seen this presentation already at the Open Institute. I'm sorry for that, but you can ask new questions this time. So I've been introduced, so I can skip that. I just wanted to say, because I work in interaction design and in computer science department, that I come from fine art, so my work is quite sort of on the creative side rather than technological side. I'm going to talk about site-specific intervention stories that happens in spaces and places, and how these stories can be mediated through technologies, and what are the design choices we are faced with when we design such experiences. Who is our audience? Of course, when we put our stories or our work in a public space, who are we targeting? And what is the technological impact? What is the impact of technology on the experience? I'm going to talk about some examples. I've selected 3 examples from early work in Amsterdam before I came to Portugal, one in Madeira, and one is the most recent in Berlin. These are just some thinking points when we're thinking about location-aware multimedia stories. They're very, very complex objects, so there are many factors that play a role, and usually, actually what I've learned over the years by working and practicing this is that you need a very interdisciplinary team, and usually I end up working more as a director, or sort of putting all of this together. So the work you're going to see is the result of teams of 3, 4, 5 people. It's not just me. So when we think about site-specific stories, we have to think about the place, the genius loci, what is the atmosphere, what is the spirit of the place, and that always plays a role in the story that we want to tell, and influences the choice of the technology that we will operate. Now, when I started to work on this, it was the early 2000s, so GPS was already a kind of advanced technology. Now we have a wide range of selection, near-field sensing, Bluetooth, iBeacon, and whatnot, so this is even more complex. Choices we need to make is what format to use. Are we going to use video, animation, audio only? Virtual reality now is becoming an option with the smartphones advances. And what are the structures for our stories? Is it going to be a database where the audience can walk through and select their content among much sort of many contributions? Is going to be a game-based where there is a goal and there is a trajectory that is advanced by the audience as they go through it? Or the structure I've worked most was the spatially distributed one, where the space actually is playing a role in the story by being the physical element through which the audience can edit their selection of stories. The stories are distributed in space. The audience walking through the space selects what material they want to view or they're going to be exposed to. And then it comes at the end, but it actually, the first element is the story itself. What is the story that we're going to tell? Is it a fiction? Is it a documentary? Is it linear, non-linear? And what is the narrative language we are using? So all of these things needs to be taken in mind when designing these elements. As I was introduced, my first experience after my PhD was to reproduce my PhD study in Amsterdam. I got a grant to basically challenge the reputation of certain neighborhoods with a different kind of intervention, with content that was coming from the people that lived in an area rather than what was the media reputation these places had. I will talk about Trading Mercator Stories. Is a collection of stories from Mercator, which is an inner city area of Amsterdam. It has a very multi-ethnic community, but it has a very bad reputation, to the point that there was a whole TV series set up in Mercator that dealt with drugs and police and crime, and so the area was actually suffering from this bad reputation. And what we did with the help of the art funds of Amsterdam, we invited the local community to make videos about characters of their area that they cared about or that they thought it was worth of a story. And we used our multimedia location-aware platform, which at the time was a mobile phone with GPS, to display the stories that were collected from the community. Through my previous studies, I've discovered the inaccuracy of the GPS could be quite misguiding. When we are dealing with location-aware stories, you want to be exactly in the place where the story is connected to. So in this case, we were talking about real people, and we wanted the stories to be near their workplace or near the house where they were living. And this was obviously consensual with them. They were allowing and happy to give the story to be displayed near their workplace. So we made the platform location aware, but also worked with tangible signals that initially, as you can see here, were meant to be on the ground. We used this idea of a chewing gum that you can sort of step on. That was actually a feature of the location, but we did not get the permission to mark the soil like that. So we came to another solution, which was to make these posters and stickers and mark around the areas where there was story material with this visual. So the GPS would give an initial signal that the story is in the vicinity, and then visually you could connect to the visual, like so, and know that that place had a story that you could access with the device. The stories were ranging from interviews, I'm going to show you an example now, with the people, to other more sort of authored one. We had a group of children that made stories about their school days. But what was in common between all of them was that they were relating to a real person that lived there. So this is the story of an immigrant from Indonesia who set up a laundry business, very successful
From
one.
Indonesia, ik woon in Jakarta. My father is Pakistaans. En ik woon hier al 31 jaar. Ik heb de zaak overgenomen in 1993, in november. Ik ben erg blij mee. Want ik verlang al lang dat ik wil een eigen zaak beginnen. Ik wil niet onder een baas werken. En tot nu, ik draai het op mijn eigen, al 14 jaar.
They're very short story. It was hard probably to understand, but it tells the story of when he came and the difficulties at the beginning and this counterpart of the success of his business. The stories are designed to be very short, so you don't have to stand around and for longer. This was us sticking the posters and the stickers around. And what we found out by, in a way, evaluating this project was that it actually really connected people to the community and counteracted the bad media reputation. We had a launch during the local art festival where we shadowed and interviewed people trying the project. At the end of the festival, 3 phones were left at the local library for people to continue to experience this. What we really actually found interesting is that one of the most enjoyable things was that people watching the stories sometimes would see the person, the protagonist, in the street or in the shop, and that would connect, that would create a sort of a magic moment for them in that connection. Another project that I worked with as soon as I arrived in Portugal, in Madeira, was again, was a different, same technology, different format, collected folk and superstitions about the Madeira island, which I enjoyed very much, collecting this content by word of mouth, basically with the help of Mara Dionysius, my student, and then rendered them through video. We filmed non-professional actors, as you can see there, with the costumes and in locations, and we realized 7 short stories about superstitions about witches and some traditional stories about Sant'Antonio fortunes. The interface again was a mobile phone with GPS. This time, instead of going and pasting the city with stickers, we worked with visual markers. As you can see on the side, they are markers that have a meaning, a semantic meaning, and they can be recognized by the camera. Technology was advanced. We used the D-touch markers of Enrico Costanza. And we had basically two technologies helping us to contextualize the stories. One was a narrator, which would be triggered by the GPS. So the phone would vibrate and the narrator would introduce the story and roughly the environment and where to go and look for the marker. And then the audience would go in search of this marker or sticker, which was exactly positioned in a meaningful architectural point that connect to the story. So there were 2 moments of interaction. Once the marker was found, then the story was released. And so the people had the time to take in the environment without looking at the phone, and once they found the marker, then they knew that they had 3 minutes video. The marker would also be positioned in a location where they could stop and watch without being disturbed or in the middle of the street. The story unfolds through the old town of Funchal. There are 7 points and 7 stickers there, and it lasts around half an hour. This is the interface, very minimal, a map with the highlighted points where you can find the markers and the story content. And of course, I'm a part of an HCI, human-computer interaction group, so despite at heart I am interested in all the artistic process and in all the storytelling aspects, and then I do have to evaluate and test. So we always have evaluation process at the end. Usually we shadow 20 to 30 users in order to have some statistical relevance, and we have questionnaires. And now we are starting to look into flow and immersion and using Csikszentmihalyi sort of theory. But through this, the important findings from these projects was to design around technology failure instead of trying to fix the technology, use it. In this case, we used the GPS inaccuracy to introduce a narrator, audio only, and then the video was delivered only upon finding the marker. The content is very important, is the core competency of a location-aware story. So if the content is not of high quality, the whole experience is not enjoyable. And to achieve a balance between the digital and the physical. The physical elements, the physical landmarks always have prevalence over the digital experience because they're real. And so if there is a big landmark, people would tend to go there and expect that there is something there, even if the technology is not indicating that. Finally, I have 1 minute to run through the last project. We did a walk through Marienplatz, which is the surrounding area around the Jewish Museum in Berlin. We're starting now to use mobile phones with virtual reality because in a way we are also a technical institute, and that's an interesting challenge, but also exploring the interaction with 360 panoramas in public spaces. The topic is explained, the idea in this video that I'm going to play, I think is short enough to give you an idea.
Welcome to Yasmin's Adventures. With this storytelling application, participants are invited to explore real locations around Marienplatz through the fictional story of Yasmin, an adventurous 7-year-old girl from the neighborhood. The story was inspired by Pinpointing Marienplatz, a project developed at the Design Research Lab in Berlin.
So the idea was to connect the many visitors of the Jewish Museum to the surrounding area, which is quite disadvantaged. And by harnessing on these visitors, we would push them out into the rest of the community. And we collected community opinions about their own neighborhoods and invented a character that has different experiences in these different points that were pointed by the community. They're good experiences if the community likes the area or the space, if they had a good opinion of it, and she has a bad experience if it's, for example, the construction works or the dirty alleys with the rats. And that's a way to communicate to an audience that doesn't know the neighborhood, what the community itself thinks about it. This again is a work of a big group, and I would like to thank Julian Hannan, Valentina Nisi, Paolo Balla, Rui Trinidad, to have worked on the graphics and all the story elements and evaluation. And it works again through mobile phones, so it's not an app yet. People have to capture markers around the museum. The markers upload a 360 virtual panorama of the surrounding area in which the stories of Yasmin are embedded. So this is easier because they only have to load this panorama once, and then they can experience different stories of the same character all around the virtual panorama. The most interesting takeaway, because I think I'm over time, was to find out that when we did our study, the people who did enjoy the experience, they did connect to the neighborhood, but felt very awkward to be in a public space using the 360 panorama scanning the environment. This gesture was awkward, and that's actually what we are now dealing with our next projects. Of course, there are many, there are papers if you're interested, and sort of the work is documented online. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 3 different perspectives, and I have a lot of questions. I hope you have too. A lot of questions to ask. We have a coffee break now. It was marked to be 20 minutes, but I think 10 minutes, it's more than enough to have a cup of coffee. So we can be here at the scheduled hour, 4 o'clock, 16. It's not the Portuguese time, it's my time, it's 4 o'clock, okay? 4 o'clock. In Portuguese time, it would be 15 past 4, but no, it's 4 o'clock. We'll start at that hour, okay? So we'll make a break. Okay. Welcome back. It's 4 o'clock in Porto. 10 past 4 in Portugal and the rest of the world. And let's start. We'll start now our round table, which is not round, but we'll have a debate. So I will open this time for the questions, but I have one first question for all of you, because something is obviously is this human interaction. You have the technology, we have the digital, but then we are analog, and there is always this challenge. So, what strategies do you think work the most or are the most efficient to get the audience engaged in what you are doing in the public? Because we have seen in Anna some difficulties. You told us about some other difficulties, and you work in arts. Let me start by you. For instance, in arts, we are used to have a sculpture or a painting, which is something that we can see today, tomorrow, in 100 years. But in digital arts, things are different. How is that interaction works? How can you engage the public with
well, I
digital
think
art?
one of the major issues and the major problems having to do with digital art is how to bring digital artifacts back into the analog world so people can experience them with their bodies, because of course the world is analog, and if we look at art history, what we see is a very strong and very rich kind of cultural pattern of many successful instances where artists actually develop very strong physical statements that relate to the body, that relate to the shape and the dynamics of the body and so on. And this is something that we could, ironically speaking, in some cases it is completely ignored in digital art, and otherwise in some digital art it becomes the sublime. By like in where look at the work of Stellark, for instance. It's a wonderful example of how extensions to the body and extensions inside the body can lead to totally new concepts of art, totally new, unseen kind of aesthetic statements that still we have to develop a framework to actually appreciate whatever is going on. But on the other hand, I think there are more, of course, in the 2, 3, or 5, or 10,000 years of human culture that we have seen, there are there's amazing number of very deep, engaging and compelling artistic statements that provide very strong support to aesthetic appreciation. And of course, some people will say, well, we still have to develop the evaluation framework for digital art, which I don't know. I don't know whether that is true. But anyway.
But for sure, it's never a static thing. It's always dynamic.
Well, art is never static itself. Art is a dynamic thing. It's a what do we say? Art. It's one of my statements is that art is a dynamic. Art is an oscillator. Sometimes I say, because in the sense that art and the production system and the appreciation system is dynamic. We relate to art by changing our opinions about art and what art can be. And I always think of the example of I love post-painterly abstraction and the whole area of the 1950s, the 60s, 70s in the New York school. And that all these painters are great examples of how your body can relate to a frame, to space, to color, to the emancipation of space and color. And this is something, these very deep emotions. And of course, in media art, we have a thing, what we call affective computing, you see? And trying to figure out how we can augment and amplify the experience of emotions. But anyway, to answer your question, I think art is a dynamic kind of thing, and we appreciate the amplitude or the intensity of the aesthetic experience in art is actually related to how much momentum we develop in the act of appreciation itself.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question, Anna, because there was something interesting when you were talking. We are used to talk nowadays by emoticons, smileys and whatever. And you said something interesting because you thought, well, elder people would be awkward to use the smileys, and it was not. And on the other right, researchers were very afraid of talking physically to people. So how is this relation between the digital and the human factor when you develop this kind of products?
Well, right.
That's a difficult one.
Yes. Well, I think that the first thing with those emoticons, it was that, as we were commenting, it was something that we within the team would never think of doing, because it felt like a paternalistic approach, and so, well, if we wouldn't think about doing that, but it was requested, and we just answered the request. And so I think that the first thing is that you don't have really to reconcile. You just have to know that you know nothing, and that you have to learn with people. And the second thing with the young researchers and talking to people much older than themselves, I think has to do not with the technology, but with this. This is human interaction, right? Even if they would go just for an interview, they felt this fear and anxiety. So, well, we are trying to work on that by training researchers when they come in. And one of the things that we always do is that the first times they go out into the field, they always go with a more experienced researcher, and usually they will watch for the first, at least, well, it depends on the activity, but they will watch for the first few minutes or 1 hour, whatever, and then they will be able to do things on their own.
Do you always get surprised with when you think of a product and you start to designing it, and then you go to a trial, and do you have many surprises when you see that nothing works as you expected, or the opposite? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I think there's one concept I like very much, which is the concept of appropriation. And I've worked with that concept for quite some time now. And you have to, I think you have to be open to it. So even when we're asking people what, I think you have experience what they need, what they want, what they would like to do. We engage in creative workshops and whatnot, but that's not real life. And we get all this feedback, and when things go out into the natural environment, things happen. All sorts of things happen, and so yes, it's always we always have surprises, and sometimes even we've done everything that people asked us to do, and it was nothing of that. So you can't use any of that. You have to redesign all over again.
Okay, this is more or less the same question for you, because you started talking about targeting, the importance of targeting the audience. You know, these projects that you did are very interesting, but we always depend on having internet and a smartphone. What were your final conclusions about this project? Did they really work? Did people know exactly what to do? It's very difficult to the audience to understand what they have to do, because they have to manage the digital and the analog both to get a story. And then you have this problem. You gotta have internet on your phone, otherwise it will not work. Can you get your microphone, please?
Well,
by the way.
I have to say that, this is a kind of a thread through my research, which started in the year 2000, where the mobile phone and even the GPS antenna were two separate things. So in order to do these things, you needed a backpack with the router, with the antenna, with everything. So it was extremely user unfriendly. And I was working with a computer scientist who did the software for me, and it was totally unusable. So I said, if this is for the community or even for tourists, how do you expect them to use? No, but it works. It's not important if they can use it or not. It's working. So that's when I realized that actually human-computer interaction was something different from computer science. And I hired one to design the interface. So that was the beginning. And then things, and again, there were all the issues. How do we, once we collected the stories, who is the target? So for these projects, we had to keep in mind the community who was giving the stories, and what do we give back to them? That's very important. They gave us their memories, and it's important that they don't feel used. And how do we communicate with tourists and people that have never been here? Because if we want to change the reputation of a neighborhood, it's not with their own community we're talking, it's with someone that hasn't been there. And that brought on the problem. at the time, still had Symbian phones, iPhones, and so there was no question of doing an app that was downloadable for all, unless we had a lot of funding or a lot of programmers. So what we used in research now for my project was to use, we just have everything on the phone. We have a device with everything, the content all here downloaded. And then what we do is that we leave the device with an institution that is central to the community. So it's an experience. It's like going to the cinema. You can go there, and for 2 hours you can take this tour. And it's for free when we can. And some of the work I did in Amsterdam was left in the Belmer, was left with the Imagine IC, who bought 10 phones and invested on advertising it. Now we're working with the tourism board of Madeira, and they want an app. The 7 stories, they want us to make it into an app. Since we are a research center, we can happily say, okay, we did the prototype. If we want an app, then you have to give us a programmer, and this will be an app.
This leads us to one more question, and then I will open up to the audience, because you all have experience in Portugal and abroad and overseas. So what I'd like to know from you is there a difference between implementing a project in Portugal and in other countries? Enlightening us, because a lot of people, of course, are starting here, but everyone has more or less ideas of go abroad to do something. So can you tell us is there any specific thing in Portugal rather than other countries? What's your experience?
I think that every country has its own culture, and that's very important to incorporate in the design of the experience. In Ireland, it's a generalization, but they're great storytellers, so it was very easy to collect the stories. You just start to talk with someone, and then you're a little bit like your big net. You just like those words, and it's like And they invited me to their homes, even for the weekend, just to tell stories. In Portugal, or at least in Madeira, it was very difficult to find the stories. And we had to go through Mara, who's my student there, and her network. And even when I was there, they wouldn't talk. So in the end, she collected them. And it was a very different. And there are also differences in the way that people approach technology. For example, what we found out in Germany, that scanning the environment to look for content was awkward. We had that kind of technology. We tested it in Madeira, and there was none of that reaction. But in Germany, they were much more self-conscious of their movement in public spaces than in Madeira. So yeah, I think it's important to get an understanding of the culture and the communities.
Okay. And Peter, can you give us your ideas, because you have an experience in this place?
Community-based projects, is important for us to connect deeply to the local culture. In terms of research, which is a completely different story, because most research today happens in international networks. So we are connected internationally speaking on a permanent basis. And whether you are in New York or Tokyo or Porto or wherever, it will be, it won't be the same, but it will be strongly related. And I think to build on this idea, I think what fascinates me at least, within the whole field of scientific research, is that the research itself is more like an excuse than anything else, because you can connect to the people, to the local people, to the culture itself. And this is something I like, is to see how people do research in all these different countries and different continents, in how they relate, how the social experience actually relates to the conceptual, if you wish. How contemplation actually relates to the body. This is kind of fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. And you want to add something?
Well, I I don't know about implementation, but I can tell you that recently I was in a meeting for a project where we have people from Japan, South Korea, Australia, Germany, Spain, several countries. And we had to agree on just a script for interviews to older adults, and we all more or less were familiarized in each country with older adults, and we were just going back and forth to, no, we can absolutely ask this in Portugal, no, we have to reframe, no, but that's not a problem, we've been doing that in Germany for, well, we have to change that, no, but in Spain you have to be careful with this. So it's really taking us a lot of time to get this script for everybody, but the good thing is that I think everyone's open to this, so everybody's aware of these differences, so it's nice.
So it's your turn now. Who wants to start shooting your questions? I know there's always a chat, or if someone asks someone, there is a question over there. If you'd be so kind to identify yourself, please. So.
Hi. Hi. My name is Dornelis. I would like to ask Valentina. I would like to ask you about the creative process of writing and making your stories beyond the technological process. How do you write these stories once you collect them? You think in scenes, plot? How do you think to adapt the stories to a small screen? Is that thing?
Okay.
Thank you. This is a really nice question. I like to
yes,
talk
because
about that.
it's different from writing a screenplay or something like that.
Very. I took a course in screenwriting to understand really traditionally how is a story built. But depends on the project. If I like to write fiction, and in writing for mobile phones, the process of the story is similar. The story world, the character, the plot, and sort of exciting incident. But then it's really the production that is different. The scenes are short because you are on a small device and you're probably on the move, so we have to cater for stopping and starting different times. And of course, big panorama don't work here, so a big kind of apocalypse now, not. So it's a very intimate relationship with your content, and close-ups, and even whispers and things that suggest a kind of a close relationship, and details, they work. I also worked in different ways when the story was not mine. So in Amsterdam, for example, we commissioned local community centers to make their own videos. I've worked with students from the TV department, commissioned them, giving them a theme. For example, for Mercator Stories, it was Inside Out. So what is happening inside that you can tell us that we are outside. And giving them some tips about this attention to the production. And then another format I like to use is to work with the writer. So to find someone with the story, like in case, I'm thinking if is one of the projects here. No, but a project of the Belmer, I worked with Pierre Heiber, I'm not pronouncing right, who wrote about the area, the neighborhood, and in Dublin too. And with them, we think about selecting some of the important stories and then storyboarding them for the small screen. So there are various methods. I also like to invent new ones.
Mm-hmm. There's always a space for improvisation also.
Yes, at every level, at the scripting, at the filming, and then because we're doing research, we're allowed to fail. It's not a marketing launch, so we can fail and we're still learning. So hope I answered.
Okay. Another question? No?
Okay, I think it's enough. So actually I have a question. I will not mingle everything to each one of the guests. And my, I will start with Valentina because she's already with words, with last words. And basically, I don't know if I'm making an assumption now, but at the end of the day, maybe what you are reaching for is some kind of immersion with the communities, with people. It's a multi-sided concept, immersion. Are you having for sensorial immersion, psychological, cognitive immersion, tactile, or they happen by sympathy? They happen to, or you plan one. You try to reach one of these concepts, and they all mingled in the end, or you try to address different aspects of it?
You mean of immersion?
Yes.
The different aspect of immersion.
Yes. Are you prioritize some of aspects of it?
When I started, I was not very familiar with. I just wanted to make a work of a piece of art. I wanted to have the stories distributed in space. And then when I went to present this for my PhD, they told me, if you don't evaluate this, you don't have a PhD. You just have a work, your own work, you can exhibit it. So I started to understand and study how can I evaluate. And by doing that, I had to differentiate. So even at the beginning, I was doing very qualitative, so interviews. Do you feel connected with the community? Do you feel immersed in the space? I was looking for these two parameters. If they could connect with the people and the community that share the stories, and if they felt the connection with the architectural space. And I was getting qualitative answers, which were mostly positive, but there were some exceptions. And then as I joined the HCI community, I started to discover scales, which was good and bad, because scales are very precise. You have specific questionnaires that would measure immersion, specific questionnaire that would measure presence, which is different from immersion. Immersion, and there are definitions for both. And then there are scales for flow, which is your engagement and your how do you feel in the experience. So there is a lot of very specific way to measure this, and I try now to be specific to when I evaluate. But when I create, I usually go more with the feeling, with the hunch of something that inspires me, that makes me want to wake up in the morning and say, okay, I want to work on this story. I want to know this culture. I want to connect with this community, with this place. And then my evaluations are becoming more and more quantitative, to say, but I don't know if that.
I will address the same question to both the three of you, but in different aspects. But starting for this, for instance, what you did in Mercator, did you get the sense, the feeling that people really knew that used the technology as a way, a means of integration, of participation? Did they get that idea or not? Or the technology was just an artifact? I don't know. What is your final idea of using technology for that means?
I have to say that at the time, it was 10 years ago, it was a little still early. So it was a bit of a top-down approach. I was commissioned to do this work because it was seen, I think for people that were already expert, that was a technology that was much more democratic than television or other means. I think that in that sense, the people were excited, the users enjoyed it, but I don't know if they really found the technology liberating. Now it's different because now really...
Your study was really ahead of the curve, as you might can say it, because it was really early. Nowadays, everyone has have a smartphone. Now, it's more. But for instance, in arts, do people get really integrated with the digital arts? For instance, we all learn in school about history and the paintings, the textures, the colors, the landscapes, whatever. But now this is completely different. It's so. How do you see the reaction of the public when it's confronted with digital arts, and what kind of integration, participation?
I don't think we can talk about participation. It's because the reaction is totally unpredictable, and also what we see. I mean, we still talk about digital art, and on the other hand, we talk about art, which is a very bad thing. It's just art, of course, and it's a very bad thing to talk about digital art in isolation, because it's just part of human culture. But still today there are a few. Incidentally, the first art shows with digital art was two different places. There was one in New York and Howard Weiss in 1965, and there was one in Germany. At the same year. So how long ago? 50 years, 60 years ago? 60 years ago. So, no, 50 years ago. And, but anyway, digital art is still kind of isolated in the sense that there are specialized galleries like Bitforms in Dam and a few others, but I think we still have a long way to go to. Another thing is that how should I say? There's not all digital art is a lot of digital art is still in the tradition of experimental art of the 1960s. It's trailing, and it hasn't surfaced in a way. And there are a lot of ideas, in particular with communication media and the internet and everything, and everyone has access to processing or whatever. But still, there are in my opinion, there are few masterpieces of digital art. There are, of course, a few outstanding pieces, but there's still pretty few. And but anyway, it's my personal opinion. And,
no, but one interesting question is that you talked about the artifact. And that's something that digital we have. And you go to museums and we have those artifacts, even from the Egyptians. So, and in digital, things tend to disappear.
But it's different culture. Well, that's also pretty much ironic in the sense that we have ubiquitous computing, where everything disappears and gets miniaturized. And so chips disappear in bottles, in iPhones, in microphones, in your pockets or whatever, even inside your body. So it becomes invisible. And at the same time, there is a new kind of urge for people to touch. So people want it big. They don't want it miniaturized. They want it big. They want it in relation to their bodies, because they want to intimately connect to that technology. And you can't do that if it disappears. It becomes invisible. And that's the reason. If you look at what's happening today in the whole make culture, that is popping up everywhere in the world. People want to touch. They want to create. They want to, and to work with their hands. This is the new culture.
And you as an artist, you want to show your work. And if I paint a landscape on the canvas, I can take it with me and say, here it is. Yeah. I painted this. But when you do an installation or something like that, you don't take it in your pocket. So how can you replicate that? How can you show it in different...
It can work in another dimension, I'm sure. If you can, and also we should be aware that the intensity of the artistic statement, and even less the quality of the artistic statement, is not in linear proportion to the sophistication of the medium. Because it's not because you're using a laptop or software or supercomputing or whatever that we can create big, important in major pieces of art. I mean, I think the best art still today is being created with low-tech media, like a pencil or whatever. And I think, sometimes I ask my students, if you have, I can show you this laptop. Have a look at it. This is probably an interactive medium. Do you agree or not? Yeah. Okay. Then I have a pencil. This is this pencil. Is this an interactive medium? Well, I can put this pencil in people put the pencil in their mouth, right? Most people do that. Why do they do that? They suck on the tip of the pencil. Why do they do that? It is to suck the idea out of the pencil. It's true. It's not, it's a true story. I mean, this is how we relate to the medium of the pencil. We put it in your mouth. Okay. I think it's pretty interactive.
It's a great idea for writing a thesis.
We will not
be chewing our computers.
The great ideas do not develop in computers. They develop with pencils on the back of an envelope. They develop when I'm taking a shower, And this is something this is a misconception that most people have, that computers are intimately linked to the creativity. It's developing through software and so on. As I said, software as a medium for introspection and speculation and so on. But anyway, it's a multifaceted thing. It's about bodies, and it's about what you can touch and what you can see and what you cannot see. All the multiple dimensions of culture is all that you can't see, but still you're relating to all that through your body.
Okay. Anna, you've been quiet. How do you create the empathy? We're not talking about art, but in things that you do, where you really need people to get empathy with the technology, so you get your objectives. So how do you get that integration, that empathy? How do you move people to technology in order to achieve your objectives?
Well, as I said, we fail many times, but the way we do that is that we try to mold technology to people, not the other way around, you see. So, imagine in terms of communication, as I said, we pay a lot of attention to words, the words that we use, and this is at least this is what we believe in the team. This is a very strong vehicle, how you use words, even in applications that are just tools to get things done. And the way this tone, actually we are studying that at the moment. So what is this, what type of personality do you prefer? How does this device have to communicate with you? That can be different to the next person. So without giving more examples, I think this is one that we are currently working on. It's quite important. So first we listen to how people talk, and then we try to translate to more technology to that, for instance.
So what's your advice when starting something? Imagine yourself what you're going to do and then present it, or first listening to the ones you're working for? Because a lot of times we are presented with solutions that are not solutions, are just problems.
Yes, this is why appropriation is so important. Well, you sometimes the designers give you something to use. It's quite unusable, but you only have that, and you have to make do. So your creativity comes about. So yes, we always try to start with reality, with people, and so in our case, we develop tools to get things done again. So we start from there, and then we see what happens.
Okay, and this leads me to the next question, which is more or less answered, but regarding info exclusion. So, as you said, you even talk to, you work for elder people, and they are not used to work with computers, some words and meanings and that we are aware forever and they are not. So how do you can cope with this reality? Everything is digitalized and a lot of people are even nowadays info excluded or are not used to use technology. Is it difficult? Or for instance, the touch technology helps a lot to overcome a lot of problems of not being used to use technology. What's your experience?
Well, my experience is that, especially with tablet devices, for people who have never had contact with a computer, it's easy. It starts with, it seems quite simple for us who are used to interact with a mouse, but for a person who has never interacted with a mouse, it can be quite hard to do this movement here and have it projected elsewhere with a different speed. So this direct contact with the surface, especially if it's big enough like a tablet device, we have been seeing that it's well, at least accelerates the process. But we also know that sometimes we've done some studies on discoverability of gestures. Sometimes they're really hard to discover. And we started by, for instance, when you have a scroll, you have a form, it's very long. And so you have to disclose the content that's hidden, right? Yeah. And because some people who are novice technology users couldn't find that, we used arrows to go back and forth, and they could do that. But the problem is that once you learn it, then we've broken this task in many small tasks, and it's just painfully boring to do this instead of just scrolling like your grandchildren taught you to do. And we also try to avoid that boring experience. So we're trying different approaches for it to be flexible, for it to learn, and also try to see the best ways to teach. Possibly the best way to go is to teach, and then make it easier. So now we are studying the best methods, like with videos, with wizards, and studying how long this, retention time. So if we go after 1 week, do people remember these? And after 1 month, so we're going step by step. I don't have the answers. This is what we're doing.
Okay, and for both of you, it's a provocation. It's because when you do storytelling, digital storytelling, when you do digital arts, digital arts, are you excluding all the other people who do not know how to work?
In what sense?
Are they excluded from?
You mean the general audience?
See, the general audience who are info excluded, who don't know how to use a computer or don't know how to use a smartphone or are not used to use technology. Are they excluded from appreciating your art, your storytelling?
Well, this is the general thing in art. I think really great art provides many doors to the same thing. So you can, whatever your type of education or your culture, good art is compelling, and it allows you to penetrate the object on whatever level, on a sophisticated, high kind of intellectual level or on a very basic level. It will always work. I think great art is like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the storytelling, maybe it's a little bit different, no?
Yeah, I have to say that when I started, surely there was an element of that elderlies and the digital divide, who would access these stories. But today is very different. I could almost argue the opposite, that now everybody has a mobile phone, and maybe it's a better way to reach a bigger audience through their mobile devices than through the mainstream media. So we were just talking before this event that maybe one way to reach, let's say, developing countries, audiences there, maybe is through their mobile phones and mobile content rather than through films or television. So I think that technology is really now, at least mobile and portable ones are cheaper and easy, and I think they will find it everywhere.
All right. Is there any more questions from the audience?
We have a question, but we have a question from Brazil. This,
Chat,
from,
okay.
Yes, from Rafael Toscano. So he asked to all of you. Historicity, as presented by Rafael, defines the capacity of systems to generate narratives based on the user's history. So he's asking you if you think that this customization of experience fosters their potential and richness, and or kills the discovery of something truly new.
So truly you in the sense that it refers to you as an individual.
Truly new.
Did I understand that?
Truly new.
Truly new.
Truly new
Through
experience.
the new.
Truly new experience.
Oh, truly new. Okay. I think I get it. Truly new. Truly new. If we look at if we look at contemporary art, what do we see that is truly new? If we go back to Marcel Duchamp, for instance, to Nude Descending a Staircase, or we go back to the beginning of the 20th century, to Bauhaus and Futurism, I think these guys were doing something truly new because it was connected to society. I think in the 1970s, punk. I mean, I was in London when punk was there, so I think that was truly new. It made sense, not particular to me, but in general it made sense. And what's happening today, that is truly new. I think today the art system, also there is a difference between art and the art system, which is something completely different. But anyway, I think like you said, appropriation is a very hot item. You look at the work of Prince, for instance. What's his first name? Richard Prince. There was so much going on at many different levels, and I have the impression that we're living on a turning point. We are now in the beginning of the 21st century, and I think there's been kind of art history used to evolve in cycles. We had Impressionism, and then we had Expressionism, and then we had minimalism, and then we had new complexity, and then so on and so forth. But now we are kind of in a floating kind of framework, and I think everyone is trying to make sense of the bubble, as sometimes it is called, because it's most of the art system today is a financial construction, nothing more, nothing less, and so I don't know. But on the other hand, one fascinating question has to do with how do you, as an individual, as I understood the question first, and which is a fascinating question in itself, how you, as an individual, how do you relate to what is happening in the world? And how can you possibly understand what's going on, and at what level, and how, in particular, does it make sense to you? And this is part of my research in terms of interactive music systems, because I'm trying to develop systems that start from scratch and that learn from an individual. It's like one program that kind of has its own thing that represents some kind of an artificial culture, and then we have one human musician and they interact, and the machine wants to express its own personality, while at the same time it wants to integrate into a larger social context suggested by a human performer. So this friction, this what I call the psychology of machines. I think there is still a lot of interesting work to do there, and of course these systems can't be programmed. They cannot be pre-programmed because they have to be coherent, while at the same time they have to be totally unpredictable. It's like meeting someone in the street and saying, "Hi, how are you?" what shall we do today? So you're throwing a fish, and you say, well, what will happen? And then you're measuring the distance between where am I going, where are you going? And so it's about psychological distances. And from these profiles of psychological distances, you can learn
So you're trying to
what to do next.
the
And
machine-
that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
you're trying the machine to have a consciousness.
Consciousness is totally different.
It's the
No,
great achievement.
consciousness- Consciousness, some people think that consciousness has to do with knowing yourself. Some people think that consciousness is just this thing outside of you. You see? So it can be anything, but that is philosophy. I try to stick to the psychology.
But for instance, regarding the audiences and the scale, do you think that the audience nowadays is bigger or smaller? Because the world is flat. We
Well, the
can have a
audience-
question from Brazil now or from Australia,
Yeah.
whatever. But are there so manifestations that is the audience bigger or smaller?
Well, it's definitely bigger because of global networks. Because knowledge in the world used to be monolithic and available in institutions. Well, now it is spread out. It is in big global networks. So definitely knowledge is spread out, so it is more accessible. And this is the thing with software, actually. And I think, again, processing is a really good example where you have programming functionality, obviously, but the impact of processing extends way beyond programming functionality into the social system. It connects people. And this is really important. Tens of thousands of people using processing, you see?
Mhm.
So definitely there is accessibility is increasingly opening up.
And what do you think about these questions of audience and the way people are producing? Everyone is producing nowadays because of the smartphones, and you have more or less complex storytelling, and you have videos of 6 seconds. You can tell a story in 10 seconds. How do you see all this movement that's going around?
Well, I connect to what Peter said earlier. I think that creativity is always before the technology. So this technology is allowing democratization, but not everybody is a storyteller. Not everybody feels like sharing. And I have much experience of that when I go around to collect stories and to ask people to share. I have an experiment which was to repurpose the Solari Udine display, those displays that are in the airports. And I connected it to, not me, my student, researcher, connected to Twitter, to Facebook, to a phone number, to text, and we placed it in the airport, asking people to share their stories through a display that used to be an authority sort of voice, and we thought that this was exciting to give this opportunity. And nobody would share. Nobody would share until we asked writers. We gave writers that were not even co-located this opportunity, and they were super excited, and we got a lot of great stories posted from outside the present audience. So yeah, my experience is really this one. There are few, maybe these tools give more opportunities to those who did not have, but the creative ones are not the one that really want to share stories or art, or there are craftsmen in the end. They are not so many as they want to make to appear. Yeah.
Okay. And one last question from me, and to finish, it's regarding money, the economics of all this, because artists sell their work, storytellers sell their work, apps are sold, or services. How is it difficult in the digital world today to get economic viability of your projects?
It's never been easy. It's never been easy, of course. But I think I can see a change. You know, a long time ago it was simply impossible to. But now the system is changing gradually. There are coming more opportunities to exhibit, to perform, but still, as I said before, we have to make a distinction between art and the art system. And in particular in the US, it's a money-driven society. So, and art is a likely candidate to participate in the game. So, but I don't know, I have no clear answer for that, but although I'm part of the system, I don't have an answer. I mean, I don't know.
Valentina.
Well, yeah, this is a great question. I have to say that when I finished fine arts, I was committed to be an artist, and then I realized not so much that I could not live of my art, I could waitress and do art, but that when I make art my job, then is not art anymore. So in a way, I needed something else to live off in order to keep the creativity pure. And maybe this is mixing art with the art system, but if you want to live off your art, you need to enter the art system. And the moment you enter the art system, you're constrained by so many things that it's not you anymore. So I feel more free in research, although there are other constraints, funding and evaluations and papers. But I personally feel freer here in academia and research than in the art world.
Okay, and Anna, you're a little different, but everything that you create is to be sold, so no point.
Well, yes, we don't actually do direct sales, but we try to work with companies who market the products. I don't think there is I don't think that if there were an answer, then we wouldn't be here. But I think that in our case, it's so diverse, the range of things that we can do, that I cannot tell how to monetize it. We know that in the case of apps, the market is huge, but we also know that so few of them succeed in millions and millions that are coming out. We prefer to have a client who tells us what their problem is, and we try to solve it, and so rather than.
All right. So we had a lot of answers, but we still have a lot of questions in our pockets. Thank you very much, Peter, Valentina, Anna, and thank you for being. And this finishes our roundtable, which is not round.